We think reading great Christian books is vital for spiritual growth. So we are asking significant Christian leaders which 3 books have changed their lives. Bob Hartman is a performance storyteller who's been entertaining audiences on both sides of the Atlantic for over 15 years. Bob's books and performances bring together retellings of Bible stories and traditional tales from around the world. He's well known for his hugely popular Lion Storyteller books.
The Lion Storyteller book of parables. It's an interactive retelling of Jesus' parables. So it's for late key stage 1, early key stage 2, and what you do is you invite the child into the parables. There's devices in the back for bringing it to life. It's for parents, teachers, Sunday school teachers. It's a way of inviting them to tell the story with you, not just tell the story to them. The Magician's Nephew is one of my favorite books. When I was a boy, 6th grade, my 6th grade teacher, he closed the curtains and he turned down the lights and he reached behind his desk and he pulled out a copy of The Magician's Nephew. And he read it to us, just day after day. I'd never heard any of the Chronicles of Narnia before. I know a lot of people like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but for me, it's that lovely picture of Aslan and the creation of the world and the singing of creation into being that's just absolutely gorgeous. It just blew me away. And for me, it just kind of created that imaginative structure that has just stuck with me the whole of my life. It's one of the books that's inspired me to write. Yeah. Frederick Buechner's Telling the Truth, The Gospel is Tragedy, Comedy, and Fairy Tale is a book that just changed the whole way I thought about preaching. I was an English major before I was called to ministry. And in seminary, I stumbled across the book. It was the Yale Lectures for 1975. Buechner had been a novelist himself. And in that book, he basically sets out a way to communicate the gospel that draws in everything that has to do with telling a good story. And so he says the gospel is first of all tragedy. We have to recognize the fallenness of the world. And then it's comedy because God speaks his joy and his beauty into this world. But he says it's also the truest fairy tale of all. It's not like the Wizard of Oz, he says. There's no man behind a curtain pulling strings because God does for us what we could never have done for ourselves. The thing I love about Hopkins is not only the fact that he more or less invented a new way of poetry, and it wasn't just that he manages to capture God's grandeur. I mean, the beauty of God shot through the world in language that just bounces and resounds and plays with language in a way that nobody had done before him. It's his story itself, because Hopkins never knew the influence that he had. He was a priest who had a hard life being a priest, and who always wrestled with the two vocations. Am I a poet or am I a priest? His work was, with a few exceptions, never published in his life. And it was only because his friend Robert Bridges, who was the poet laureate, actually got the stuff published that anybody even knows who he is. But he never realized the impact that he made. And for me as a writer, I think it just speaks a lot about the virtue of just doing it because you love it and because it's the thing God's called you to do. I write because I was a reader first. Kids in schools always ask me, why do you write? And I say, because when I was a kid, I read. And I love to read, and I still love to read. It changes me, and it moves me, and it inspires me. And that happened when I was a kid. It happens now, and so you want to do the same thing. It's kind of like if you're a football fan, and you love a particular team and a particular player, and you say to yourself, one day I want to be able to play like that. Well, I think there's the same connection between reading and writing. So for me, the reading is the thing that just kind of sparks me and inspires me and kind of gets me going, and it always has done. Well, guys, it's lovely to be here. Thanks so much. And as you know, if you've heard me talk before, I love to do stories, and I love to do interactive stories. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for you guys to join me in the story. Is that okay? That all right? Okay, well, let's just start. This is a song, actually, which is going to kind of kick the whole thing off. And I want you to take your thumb, and I want you to put it in your armpit, okay? Thank you. Don't put it in your neighbor's armpit. That's just nasty, all right? Put it in your own armpit, and then put your thumb in your other thumb in your other armpit, okay? And you'll find you look a bit like a chicken, all right?
which is kind of where this song starts, all right? And I'm going to teach it to you line by line. So it goes like this. It goes, God made the chickens and the cows and the bees. Can you try that? God made the chickens and the cows and the bees. Lovely. God made the flowers and the shrubs and the trees. God made the flowers and the shrubs and the trees. God made the tops and the bottoms and the knees. God made the tops and the bottoms and the knees. And God made me. And God made me. Let's put it together. Here we go. God made the chickens and the cows and the bees. God made the flowers and the shrubs and the trees. God made the tops and the bottoms and the knees. And God made me. Which is wonderful, isn't it? Somebody points to you and says, God made you special, unique, amazing. That feels good, doesn't it? It does. It does. But you know what sometimes we forget? Sometimes we forget, and particularly when we do this with kids, sometimes we forget when we tell them that God made them amazing, that God also made the person sitting next to them amazing. Just as amazing, just in a completely different way. So what I want you to do is to turn to the person next to you and say, you are amazing. God made you unique. And God has a purpose for your life. Indeed, and that's why we have the second verse. It goes like this. God made the alligator and the kangaroo. Here we go. God made the alligator and the kangaroo. God made the elephant and the pygmy shrew. Which, as I explained to children, is an animal smaller than a mouse. So here we go. God made the elephant and the pygmy shrew. That was lovely. God made the mountains and the valleys in Peru. God made the mountains and the valleys in Peru. And God made you. And you point to somebody. And God made you. Lovely. Let's put it all together. Here we go. God made the chickens and the cows and the bees. God made the flowers and the shrubs and the trees. God made the tops and the bottoms and the knees. And God made me. God made the alligator and the kangaroo. God made the elephant and the pygmy shrew. God made the mountains and the valleys in Peru, and God made you. Now get this. You may be tall, you may be small, it doesn't matter one bit. God looks at you and announces to the world, what a star, what a picture, what a hit. Here we go. God made the chickens and the cows and the bees. God made the flowers and the shrubs and the trees. God made the tops and the bottoms and the knees. And God made me. God made the alligator and the kangaroo. God made the elephant and the pygmy shrew. Ooh, ooh. God made the mountains and the valleys in Peru, and God made you. Give yourselves a clap. Very well done. Now, whenever I go into a school, I almost always start with that song. And if I don't start with that song, I start with the story that that song represents. Because what I want children to know, what I want every child to know, is that they are not here by mistake. And they are not here by accident. And they are not here just because, well, we don't know why they're here. I want them to know that they're here because somebody put them here. Somebody made this world for them as a gift. And somebody has an intention for them and for this world. And somebody loves them. I want them to know the story. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about passing on God's story. Because the reality is that unless our children know the story, unless they fall in love with the story, unless they're overwhelmed by the story, they're going to struggle to meet the God who is behind the story and through the story, at the beginning and the end of the story. So I not only want them to know that they're special and precious and here for a reason, but also that, yeah, sometimes things go wrong, you know? Between people, sometimes we don't always treat each other in loving fashions. But that God doesn't give up on us because of that. And so he called a people, and out of that people he called a person, and his son came to the world and taught us how to love one another and how to live, and died on a cross to take all the bad stuff away, and then came back from the dead to lead us to an eternal place, to a new heaven and a new earth. Shaped like him, created new again, where we'll spend forever together. You see, I want them to know that story. And yes, along the way, much as you do if you teach Sunday school classes or if you teach your own children, along the way, yes, there are other stories that will fit into that story. But you see, unless they know that story, unless they know the big story, then sometimes I think they're going to struggle to know how the other stories actually work. What's the relationship between, Noah and Daniel in the lion's den and the parable of the sower? To know, sometimes, we tell these stories to kids and they kind of wander away thinking, well, how does that fit? Which is why I'm pleased that the Open the Book people are not only serving as coffee today, but that they do what they do every week in and week out, telling God's story to children right around this country. What is it now, Val? Something like 700,000 children a week? Telling God's story to those children in a consecutive fashion from Genesis to the book of Acts, so the kids know how the story works and know how the stories all fit together. But see, knowing the story isn't enough. Knowing the story simply leads us to the one who's behind the story, the one who wants us all to be drawn into his story. And so we got another story for you right now. This first action is going to be a little tricky. You're going to have to leap. Now, here's the thing. It's early in the morning, and you probably don't want to leap right now. And some of you probably have coffee in your hands. You definitely don't want to leap if you got that. So here's what you're going to do. When I say leap, just kind of give it one of those, and I'll believe your bottom left the chair. All right? Okay, shall we just try that? So 1, 2, 3, leap. Look at that. I believe that. Some of your bottoms actually did leave the chairs. Here we go. Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3, leap. Lovely. Okay. Now we're going to creep. 1, 2, 3, creep. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, creep. Lovely. Then we're going to sleep. Okay, that's a nice motion. Then we're going to peep. Yes. Then we're going to stand at the edge of something quite steep. So we're going to look into the abyss and we're going to go steep. Are you ready? Steep. Lovely. Then we're going to drive a Jeep. All right. Then we're going to make a heap. All right. Then we're going to repeat one of the actions. Now, some of you might have heard me tell this story before, and if you have, you don't get to guess. But if you haven't heard it, what Bible story do you think we're going to tell based on those actions? Yes, I know the Jeep is a problem. Anybody have any idea what Bible story we're going to tell based on those actions? Any ideas at all? We're only on television. It doesn't matter, If he gets the wrong thing, it's no big deal. Sorry? Zacchaeus is an excellent choice, but no, it's not him. It's kind of in the same category, though. That's fair enough, yeah? Anybody else? The clue is in the rhyme. The clue is in the rhyme. Sheep. Somebody, sheep. Yes, here we go. There once was a shepherd who had 100 sheep. There once was a shepherd who had 100 sheep. There once was a shepherd who had 100 sheep. They skipped and they frolicked and they leaped. They skipped and they frolicked and they leaped. They skipped and they frolicked and they leaped. But one of the sheep was more curious than the rest. One of the sheep was more curious than the rest. One of the sheep was more curious than the rest, and away from the others he creeped. Away from the others he creeped. Away from the others he creeped. Someone's missing, said the shepherd when he counted up that night. Someone's missing, said the shepherd when he counted up that night. Someone's missing, said the shepherd when he counted up that night. Until I find him, I shall not go to sleep. Until I find him, I shall not go to sleep. Until I find him, I shall not go to sleep. So the shepherd left the 99 and went off in the dark. The shepherd left the 99 and went off in the dark. The shepherd left the 99 and went off in the dark, and behind every boulder he peeped. Behind every boulder he peeped. Behind every boulder he peeped. And finally he found him, his lost and lonely sheep. Finally he found him, his lost and lonely sheep. Finally he found him, his lost and lonely sheep, trapped in thorns where the path was rough and steep. Trapped in thorns where the path was rough and steep. Trapped in thorns where the path was rough and steep. So the shepherd freed the sheep and put him on his shoulders. The shepherd freed the sheep and put him on his shoulders. The shepherd freed the sheep and put him on his shoulders. Man, he thought, I sure could use a Jeep. Man, he thought, I sure could use a Jeep. Man, he thought, I sure could use a Jeep. Then he took the sheep back home and he put him with the rest. He took the sheep back home and he put him with the rest. He took the sheep back home and he put him with the rest in a white and woolly happy 100 heap. And a white and woolly happy 100 heap. And a white and woolly happy 100 heap. Then the shepherd called his neighbors and his friends. The shepherd called his neighbors and his friends. The shepherd threw a party for his neighbors and his friends. They skipped and they frolicked and they leaped. They skipped and they frolicked and they leaped. They skipped and they frolicked and they leaped. The end. Well done, everybody. You see, God's intention is to reach out to all of those sheep, wherever they happen to be. And he wants us to do that on his behalf. And particularly if we are parents or grandparents, he wants us to see our children and our grandchildren as priorities in that reaching out, in the telling of the story, and bringing our children to him. But there is a problem. And to care for the family and Hope arranged to have some people do some surveys earlier in the year. And what they discovered was that while parents felt and understood that it was their responsibility primarily to share their faith with their children, and while they understood that it was an incredibly important task, they also felt that they weren't doing enough of it and could do it more effectively, but felt a lack of confidence, I guess, and a lack of resourcing to be able to actually make it happen in their homes. They understood that in the very best of churches, the amount of time that children's workers spend with children in the church is limited. I mean, just by the nature of the beast. And they understood that they actually had the best opportunity to share their faith with their kids, but they just weren't confident enough to do it as effectively as they thought they should. In a sense, it's kind of like that story Jesus told, that story about himself and the children, where there was just some question about that interconnection. Jesus wants children to come to him, but sometimes there's something in the way. I've just finished a rhyming Bible for SPCK. It's coming out next year, and I'm so looking forward to it because I haven't had a chance to do a lot of rhyming stuff. So I've done the story of Jesus and the children in this particular Bible. Now, I'm going to do it with you guys here today, but I have to divide you into 3 groups, and as you can probably tell, you're basically in 2 groups right now. It's not really fair to get the camera people to do that because they're already doing something. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide this side. We're going to ask you to be very brave. We're going to divide this side right behind here, okay? So you guys up here are group 1. You're the children. You guys back here are the mums, okay? And you guys on this side are all the dads. Is that all right? And all you have to do when you get to your bit is simply stand up and act out your bits, okay? So children, mums, and dads. Here we go. Children, would you please stand up? Here we go. All right. The children were running and jumping and giggling. Nice. The children were skipping. Ooh, very nice. And playing and wiggling. The children were hopping and squirming and wriggling, waiting in line to see Jesus. Please have a seat. Give him a clap, everybody. Well done. Okay, moms, to your feet. Here we go. The mothers were wiping their kids' runny noses. Nice. You can wipe the nose of your neighbor if you like. That's fair enough. The mothers were stood in a bunch of bored poses. There you go. The mothers impatiently tapping their toeses, waiting in line to see Jesus. Give them a clap, everybody. Have a seat, mums. Okay, dads, up on your feet. The fathers were mumbling and moaning and squawking. The fathers were scheming and planning and talking. The fathers all grumbled about the queue stopping, waiting in line to see Jesus. Give them a clap, everybody. Then Jesus' disciples arrived and explaining said, Jesus can't see you. There's no use complaining. He's healing the sick. There's so many remaining waiting in line to see Jesus. Now, stop that, said Jesus. I want the kids near me. You all should be like them, with no need to fear me. No waiting, he said. And he said it quite clearly, waiting in line to see Jesus. So the children jumped up on his lap, you can sit back down again, and he blessed them. Hank, thank you guys. The mothers all clapped, for his words had impressed them. The fathers clapped too, for the whole thing had stressed them. Waiting in line to see Jesus. Waiting in line to see Jesus. Give yourselves a clap. Thank you. So the question is how, you know? If we feel like we need to pass our faith on to our kids, and there's a disconnect because we struggle to know quite how to do it and how to do it effectively, what are some tips for doing that? And I'd just like to suggest 2. And they're actually more attitudes than they are tips, but I think it's the attitudes that frame the whole thing. And the first attitude I'd like to suggest is passion. Is passion. Because you see, it seems to me that if we are passionate about something, if we personally are moved by something and desperate to do something and to follow Jesus, then our children will see that passion and they'll be attracted to it. And it's not a guarantee, but there's a better chance that they will become passionate with us. Now, I've brought with me something I'm sure nobody here has ever seen before. Anybody ever seen one of these before? No? I'll just show you what you do with it. You take it and you swing it around your head, okay? This is a terrible towel, all right? It says it on there. It's a terrible towel. I come from Pittsburgh, and this is like the official item, the official relic, I don't know, the official thing of the Pittsburgh Steelers, all right, who are our American football team. And when we want them to do well, either offensively or defensively, we do that. We twirl our towels. And it's lovely, actually. It was a broadcaster who invented them, and all the money goes to the Autism Society. He didn't make a penny from it. Now, the thing about the terrible towel is this. Not every household in the city of Pittsburgh owns one, but I bet almost every household does. Because unlike the support for football teams over here, you can't actually live in Pittsburgh and not support the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just like, it's not that they tell you to leave, but the reality is that everybody does. And everybody does because their parents before them did, and because their parents before them did. And because that passion for the Steelers passes on from generation to generation to generation. Nobody has to teach their children to love the Steelers, because the television is on a Sunday afternoon or a Sunday evening, and the towels are out, and everybody's wearing their black and gold uniforms, and everybody's sat there cheering for the team. You don't have to teach anything. All you have to do is be passionate. I mean, I've got grandchildren. I've got 3 here and 1 in the States. And when they were born, you know, they got black and gold onesies. Simple as that. Okay? And the ones here as well, you know? I mean, I need to support Liverpool on their behalf, but doggone it, they're supporting the Steelers on my behalf. And it's not like I'm making them. They love the Steelers because I'm passionate, and they're passionate too. Now, like I said, it's no guarantee, but the reality is that if we are passionate about our faith, passionate, as with the Steelers, when the team's winning and when the team's losing, because sometimes in churches it's like that too, yeah? Sometimes the team's winning, sometimes the team's losing, sometimes it's harder to be a Christian than other times. But if at the root of it, there is passion for our faith, then that passion will be catching. It will be catching. There's a story, and I'm going to try not to tear up when I tell this story. But when my kids were growing up, one of the things we did was we not only read Bible stories to them, but we read other stories as well. And when they were in their sort of early teens, we read the works of Madeleine. I don't know, does anybody know Madeleine? I think I probably recommended her the last time that I did this. But she wrote a book called A Wrinkle in Time, which again is one of the great books about faith and sort of not about faith. But I mean, she was a Christian and her faith kind of shines through that book. And she wrote 3 books after it, which made a quadrilogy, I don't know, something of 4. And so we spent time when the kids were younger teens reading those around the kitchen table, either before or after meals. And one day we were going out to a restaurant. And Chris said, my son, said, "Are we going to take the book with us?" I was like, yeah, okay. So we put the book in the bag and we took it, and before or after, I can't remember which, the meal, we read another chapter from one of Madeleine L'Engle's books. Now, being a dad, I'm not blaming dads, but I'm certainly this way. I forget lots of things that happened, and my wife has to remind me all the time. And I'd kind of forgotten that thing as well. But Chris, who's 34 now, said to me a couple of years ago, "Do you remember, Dad? Do you remember when we read the book? Do you remember when we did it in Kings? Do you remember that?" You see, I hadn't remembered it, but Chris had remembered it because it was something we did. It was something that was important to us. It was something we were passionate about. And because of that, he not only enjoyed doing it and was willing to do it as a young teenager in a restaurant, but he remembered it for the next 20 years. You see, it's that. It's that passion that can't be taught. It's just something that you do. It's something you are. Just like you live in Pittsburgh and you are a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, that's who you are. So, if you are a follower of Jesus, that's who you are. And if you're passionate about that, then your children are going to want to be passionate too. And the other thing they're going to want to do is participate in that faith with you. You see, if all you do is sit them down and tell them about Jesus, that's not good enough. What you have to do is invite them to be passionate with you. So, to come along to church with you, and to be engaged in the soup run, when you're feeding the homeless, with you. To be involved in ministry to whoever you're ministering to in your church and in your community, to do it with you. And you see, that simply just emphasizes the passion, and it just makes it stronger. When I was a kid, every Christmas Eve, our church would go and sing carols to people in an old folks' home. Now, there were thousands of other things I could have done on Christmas Eve, and I would have preferred to do on Christmas Eve. And the first couple of times we did it, I was like, oh man, why can't we be having parties like everybody else, or opening presents or something like that? Why do we have to go to this old folks' home? But my parents were like, look, this is what we're doing. This is who we are, all right? This is a good thing. This is something Jesus would want us to do. So off we trooped. And you know what? After the first couple of times, Christmas wasn't the same without going to the old folks' home and singing the carols. It's like their passion was infectious, but it was infectious particularly because I was invited to participate in that along with them. And my grandchildren, are exactly the same. My son-in-law is one of the worship leaders at church, and he's been doing it ever since Malachi was born. Malachi's 11 now. And about the time Malachi was 3, I think, Martin was up there playing his guitar in the church band. And Malachi had somewhere, I don't know what got it for Christmas or found, this little blue guitar. Tiny little thing, okay? It might have been a ukulele, I don't know. And he had it in his hands, and he had a little stool, and he was sat next to Martin at the front playing the guitar as well. Now, he didn't know any chords, All he knew was to strum. And, they didn't mic him or anything, but they also didn't tell him to go sit someplace else. They let him stay there and play week after week after week. And you know what? Malachi took guitar lessons, and Malachi learned to play the guitar, and now Malachi's a part of our worship band, And they really do plug him in now, because he's really, really good, all right? He's like our little metal corner, he's amazing, Malachi is. And you know what? His little brother, Jacob, who's 5, he's sitting on the stool now with the ukulele, strumming away and not playing any chords. Because it's not just about passion, it's about participation. It's about sharing what we believe, but not just what's in our heads, but what's in our hands and what's in our feet. And doing it all together, doing it as a family. Now, let's just say, that's no guarantee, all right? That's fair enough, I understand that. But it does seem to me that we've got a much better chance of passing our faith on to our kids if they see that we're passionate about it. If we invite them into that room, a bit like inviting them onto the lap that Krish and I were talking about later, invite them into a place where together we can explore who God is and how he wants us to live in this world. And with that in mind, let me just say as well that it is important to be sharing, our faith, to be sharing our Bible stories with our kids. So I brought a couple of resources along today. It's mostly just mine here, but can I just say, if you've got late key stage 1 and early key stage 2 kids, Gemma Willis's book, Diary of a Disciple, that was published by SU, is absolutely excellent. Can I just recommend that to you? We don't have any copies here. Now, I've written something called Bumper Tales from the Bible, which is a collection of my 3 unauthorized Bible books, and it's also for key stage 2, maybe geared more to boys than to girls, but again, trying to reach a group that doesn't often get reached by this kind of stuff. The sheep story I told you is from this one. It's all kinds of stories from the Bible that are done in an interactive fashion that you can do with your kids. Here's the play-along Bible, which Krish has already talked about for your little guys. And can I say, one of the things I'm really, really keen on at the moment is creating picture book Bible stories that we can share with our children. Because the reality is that the journey in a collection, like in a family Bible, is good, but usually you've only got 2 pages. What a picture book gives you is a whole journey through picture and words that your children will be used to because of reading general market picture books. But we need some more of these, that's all. We need some more of these to take them through that journey, again, on the lap, in that place where together we can spend time journeying through God's Word. Well, I hope some of the things that I've said have helped. But I want to finish, if it will come up, and it did, with a poem that I've actually written for Care for the Family in response to what they're going to do. They're creating an initiative called Faith in the Family. And they're going to be going around the country actually encouraging and equipping parents to more effectively share their faith with their kids. And Riding Lights has created a whole show to do it that they're doing in conjunction with Vineyard. So by all means, if you're keen on that, and I hope you are, you'll tap into those things. But let me just finish with this poem. I remember when Mum showed me how to bake cakes. The stirring, the sifting, the flour then shifting from bag into bowl onto measuring scale, then to faces and aprons and floor. But what I recall best were her hands and her laugh, and the way that she smiled, and the sounds of her claps when she tested and tasted that very first cake, even though it looked like a mistake. I remember when Dad showed me how to ride bikes, the wobble, the wibble, the push and the pedal, the smell of the grease and the shiny new metal, the scar I still have on my knee. But what I recall best were the sound of his boots, his arms around my shoulders, his cheers and his whoops, when topple and shake became balanced and straight, even though I crashed into the gate. I remember when Nan told me tales from the Bible, the roar of the giant, the roar of the lions, the roar of the tums of those hungry 5,000. I think she liked roaring a lot. But what I recall best was her obvious thrill that the God who fed all of those folk on the hill loved me and loved her and loved everyone still, just like he loved David and Daniel. What I recall best and what makes so much sense is the feeling that there was not much difference between passion for cakes and passion for breaks and passion for showing me how God is great. They shared what they loved. They shared what they knew. And because of their love, I now share that love too. Thank you very much.